Hello, and welcome to the Cleveland International Film Festival Film Slam Streams. I'm Eric Siler, Professor of Film, Media Arts, and Communication, as well as your moderator for this conversation. And we are very pleased to be joined by the director of our film today, Salam. The director is Claire Fowler. Claire is joining us from New York today. Hello, Claire, and welcome.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Well, good to meet you too. Very interesting film. I know you shot this film about 3 years ago, but the message still remains the same in the film about, the lives of different people. How did you come up with the idea for this film?
So I had spent some time in Palestine making a couple of documentaries. And the last documentary I'd made when I was filming a village which was surrounded by the separation barrier, which had been kind of cut off from the rest of Palestine, but also cut off from Israel as well. And it was kind of suffering because of that. And when I was leaving, a teacher in the school said to me, when you leave, you're going to forget about us because everybody always does. And that just made me really sad. And so I always knew that I wasn't going to do that. I didn't want to do that. But then shortly after that, my life changed quite dramatically because I moved to the United States and I started a film degree or a film MFA at Columbia in New York. But then, 2016 rolls around and it's a presidential election. I'm in New York and I'm seeing all of this anti-immigrant and anti-Muslim rhetoric. And I'm an immigrant, I'm not Muslim, but I know many Muslims personally, had spent time in the Middle East. And I knew that I wanted to make a film as a show of solidarity with other immigrants and with my friends in Palestine who felt, misrepresented, I think, on the global stage. And one of the things that I noticed living in New York was that even though it's a really diverse city, there's a lot of communities that don't often mix because they're kind of, stuck in their own maybe economic kind of bubbles. But one of the ways that people do mix is through increased ride sharing, like Lyft and Uber and those kind of things. And so I wanted to make a film about two people from two completely different communities who were brought together in one night, and then they find just a point of connection between the two of them. And that was kind of it.
Oh, good. So this film is it's not really a true story, but it's something that could actually happen.
Yeah.
I see. Interesting. So that's good that how you did that, because your characters, Audrey and Salam, coming together from two different worlds in the film. And can you talk a little bit about the actual production process? You were kind of all over New York as well,
Yeah.
on the subway, inside of an apartment, out in the outside of the city as well too. How long did it take you to actually film this, and how did you pull it all together?
Right. So I think we filmed for three days and one night, I believe, or it might have been 3 days, half a day and half a night, something like that. It was super low budget. We'd had to postpone the shoot. I'd actually been granted a small production grant for the script in 2016, and it wasn't enough money, and they kept pushing me to make the film. And I postponed for, I think it was over a year. And then I finally kind of bit the bullet and knew that I had to do it. It just wasn't, it was one of those things. Sometimes you just have to, suck it up, put it on a credit card. So a bunch of the film went on a credit card. We got the most minimal crew we could. A lot of me pulling in favors from old friends, people I'd met working on film sets. And we were in pre-production sort of whilst I was working and whilst my producer was working for about 6 weeks. So that's not full-time pre-production. That's just like fitting in what we could, like going on location scouts and, and all the things that production requires. And then, we had a kind of kind of a messy shoot. It wasn't, you know, it's not my proudest moment when I think about the kind of the production struggles we had, because as somebody who works on a film set as a script supervisor, I you know, I think it's really important to treat crew well, and I hope that everybody has a good experience. But you know, when you're working with such low budgets, stuff happens. Like, you know, you get somebody who's maybe inexperienced who doesn't turn up, and that has a big impact on the rest of the day. Or you know, lunch doesn't arrive and people have to work longer than they intended to, or you know, you put somebody up in an Airbnb and then the Airbnb isn't that great. And so, you know, there's loads of like little teething problems, but you know, we struggled through it. We had a lot of hurdles, but we overcame them.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's all part of the production process. I mean, people, you know, don't know what it takes to actually, you know,
Yeah.
make the final product. So let's talk a little more specifically about the film. Uh, we see that you know, Salam is a ride-share driver, but she finds out some unfortunate news right before she starts her shift. Why did she continue to work? Was she trying to distract herself from what was going on back in her home country?
Yeah, for me, the character, I mean, Salam, I don't know if it's completely clear in the film. I hope it is, but Salam lives with her brother and her sister-in-law and their kids. And, you know, that none of them are particularly wealthy. They're all struggling to get by. And just before she starts her overnight shift, she gets a phone call, and we don't exactly know who has been injured in Syria or another country, but we know that somebody in another country has been injured in a bombing, and it's really upset Salam. And yeah, to my idea was that Salam has responsibilities and she doesn't want to shirk them on the one hand, and on the other hand, she's somebody who knows her own mind, and she knows that she has to just keep moving forward and try and stay positive and just try and stay busy.
Right, exactly. And that's real life. A lot of people do that as well too. And what about Audrey? Can you tell us a little bit about her character, where she was coming from, and how she evolved in her relationship with Salam?
Yeah. So Audrey, as the character of Audrey was cast kind of last minute. It was pretty hard to find a really great actress in that age range who was available. And I ended up reaching out to a friend of mine who's a playwright, who I'd worked for. She's called Teresa Rebeck. And I said, Teresa, we're shooting next week. The person I wanted for this role has dropped out because of other commitments. Who do you know in this demographic? And she just fired off, you know, a bunch of suggestions, and Leslie Bibb was one of them. And I knew of her. I watched a movie that she was in. I can't remember what it's called. It's about, it's got Lily Collins in it. It's about a young girl who's in an anorexia clinic, an eating disorder clinic. I thought Leslie was great. I reached out to her, sent her the script, and by this time, you know, we were like sort of 4 or 5 days out from shooting, and Leslie said, I'm available, I'm in New York, I'll do it, it's going to be great. And she was great. You know, she invited Hannah, who plays Salam, and I round to her apartment in the East Village, and she shares that with Sam Rockwell. So she's married, she's not married, she's partners with Sam Rockwell, and this was just a few months before he won the Oscar. So that was like super cool. You know, we went round to their apartment. We discussed the character. Leslie always likes to have a lot of input in character development, and she doesn't really want to do projects that don't speak to her. And, you know, the idea that Audrey had gone to some kind of like fancy event that night, that was, you know, there was a bunch of possibilities we had kind of floating around, and I wanted to kind of keep it open for discussion. And Leslie kind of like guided the character. This, you know, she felt, yeah, Audrey would have been at an event with her husband, and the kind of couple who like to put on, you know, this kind of perfect united front, but really there's a lot going on behind the scenes. And she felt that it was interesting for her to see somebody, you know, looking really, really glamorous, but actually having one of the worst nights of their life.
Yeah, it's exactly. I just want to remind everyone who's watching that we're about halfway through our conversation with the director of Salam, Claire Fowler. And if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A portal and we'll get to them as time allows. That's interesting that you said, Claire, how Leslie, the character of Audrey, had input into the script and the development of the film. And one thing that struck me that Leslie said, Audrey said was, she said in the film, just because you are oppressed doesn't mean we all are. And that's a very gripping line. It was almost like a signature line in the film. Is that something that you came up with? And how did you come up with that line to actually kind of cement the film?
Yeah, that was one of my lines. And I think because I'm not really sure exactly how I came up with it, but when I'd made documentaries in the past about various issues in Palestine that had been caused by things like the separation barrier and checkpoints and, you know, just militarization of occupied Palestine. When I was taking those films on tours of film festivals, it was really interesting to hear the different responses I got. And one of the things that did kind of freak me out was, you know, hearing people who couldn't discuss such a complex issue in complex terms. It was like they had to talk about either Palestinians as being bad people or Israelis as being bad people. And that's really not what I'm about. You know, people aren't bad. You know, as a group, people aren't bad. Individuals can be bad. Rules can be bad. You know, decisions that they make and impose upon other people can be bad. But I really didn't like hearing those kind of things. I guess this is kind of a rambling, roundabout way of saying that I feel like there's a kind of a defensiveness from some people, you know, white people, privileged people, and when they're confronted by people that they don't, from other communities that they maybe feel threatened by, there's a defensiveness, and I just wanted to kind of access that defensiveness. You know?
It is exactly like that. You did a great job, and the characters carried out that quite well. We do have one question that has come in. Interesting question is, was there any significance to having the mouse in the beginning of the film?
Not really. I thought a mouse was more palatable than a roach, but a roach would have been much more normal for New York. What I wanted to do was really have a scene where I brought the family together and showed what a unit they were and how much they care about each other, and how even in, you know, a sort of maybe a slightly unpalatable kind of domestic incident, which is actually really kind of regular if you live in New York. You know, it doesn't matter how much money you've got, you're going to get a roach or a mouse in your apartment at some point. I just wanted to have something that was kind of light to bring them together, to show who these people are and how much they care about each other.
Exactly. That's what I gathered as well too. You know, something kind of lighthearted to kind of set the tone for that family, like you said. Another question we have is, what is the meaning behind showing the shot of the grass at the end?
The grass at the end, if you, I don't know if anyone can bear to rewatch the film. If you watch the film, when Audrey goes off and stands by the grass and takes the phone call, which we never explicitly say who the phone call is to, but I hope people can, you know, pick up on the fact that it is from her partner or her husband, who is, she's had an argument with, he's emotionally abusive, she's kind of stuck in this bad relationship. And when she goes and walks out to that grass, it's almost like she's at this, she's at this barrier. Like, is she going to go forward or is she going to go back? And when she's standing at the grass, she just plucks a piece of grass. And it was almost accidental. It was, when I went scouting for the location, I just was driving rounds and rounds and rounds New Paltz and upstate New York. And I found this beautiful field and I stopped there and I went out there and I just pulled up a piece of grass and I left it and I rented the car that I was going to shoot in for like a week. So I only found the location like the week before. And I just left the grass in the car and the windshield, and it was there when we were shooting. And we just liked having that connection. Once she was back in the city, I think it was scripted, but I had accidentally just left it there as well. So, so it was really about that character being at this kind of, at this threshold. Is she going to go forward or is she going to go back? And then she goes back, and then, this piece of grass is just like this tangible kind of this symbol and this memory, and then this tangible object that reminds Salam of this moment.
Oh, well, good. Very, very good. And speaking about symbols at the end, I love the shot of the bridge at the end, kind of like bridging two cultures together. It was a nice way to kind of seal the film. I guess, was that your intent by showing the bridge, or it just worked out that way?
We definitely, we knew we wanted to shoot on the bridge. I don't know, it's just, to me, it's so iconic. And there's just something really weirdly unique about the way New York is structured with the boroughs and with the bridges connecting it. So I didn't really think about the idea of like bridging two cultures, but that totally fits. But I also sort of feel like, each of the boroughs in New York have really distinct characters. So that kind of really works. Yeah.
It really does, all the different boroughs connected by bridges to make one city, in a sense. So let's talk about the ending of the film. The reaction of Salam when she receives the phone call is kind of hard to interpret. What do you want viewers to interpret with the ending of the film?
It was a decision that I made that the only person I wanted to hear the voice on the phone was Salam. And I still don't know whether it was the right decision, but I felt like in this moment, I want the audience to be, with Salam, as in, we don't know what is at the end of that phone, and we don't know what the news is that she's getting. And the only kind of breath of relief is when we see her kind of cry and smile at the same time. So, I wanted her to be, in front of the audience. I wanted her to kind of have more knowledge and for us to be learning it through her reaction.
So what has the reception of the film been? Have people, how did they conclude the ending of the film? Did she receive good news or bad news?
Pretty much everyone said good news. I think, I think there was one or two people in Q&As, but no, mostly I think people really got that, she'd had good news. And for me, I just felt like it was really important that after everything this poor woman I've put this poor character through, that she did have good news. Because I didn't want to I've made films that are just unrelentingly bleak. And this is a good, a note for your students, is not many people want to watch unrelentingly bleak films. So I do think it's important, if you're going to do a film about a really dark, bleak, oppressive, or, depressing subject, that think about trying to put a moment of lightness in there, or think about not ending on a really, really depressing note, because it's hard for people to take. And if your film is good and it's just super depressing, you've done a good job in depressing people, but is that really what you want to do? Do you want to depress people, or do you want to kind of leave them with a message of hope? I mean, both are fine, but it's just a question to, ask yourself.
Exactly. Yeah, to ask what type of outcome do you want, and that goes for the students watching, whether they're making a film or writing a paper. Well,
Right.
well, we're just about out of time. Before I let you go, can you let everyone know what you're working on now? What can we expect to see from you um, in the future?
Yeah. Um, so right now, I'm working on two things because to make a living, I work on set as a script supervisor, and I was actually intending never to go back to that again, but then the pandemic hit, and I think everybody's, economic lives and social lives and everything lives were just turned upside down, and so I've returned to that job.
Okay, sorry to interrupt, but can you just explain to the students on what a script supervisor does real briefly?
Yeah, so a script supervisor works on set, sitting next to the director, tracking continuity. So that could be continuity of the script, making sure that the actors say the lines right. It could be the continuity of, which hand they pick something up with, camera direction. Are they walking into the frame the right direction? Are they exiting the frame the right direction? Is the eye line right? So it's just like sort of double checking almost every other department, basically. So when you work on a really professional film set, like a TV set that knows its stuff, it's a lot easier to be a script supervisor than when you're first starting out and you're coming up against a bunch of other people who might not know what they're doing, because then you have to kind of like run around like crazy and like pick up after them. But it's a pretty tiring job, and I learned a lot about directing from it. But yeah, I don't want to do it forever, and but I'm back doing it just for sort of pandemic reasons. But at the same time, I'm developing a script with BBC Films, which is not directly related to Salam, but it was kind of, it came off the back of Salam. They really liked Salam. They liked the characters. They liked the whole package. So that kind of encouraged them. So it's a film set in North Wales, and it is about an immigrant but set in North Wales, which is where I'm from. So it's kind of, bringing a lot of things in my life back to where I am from originally, which is going to be interesting. Yeah, so I'm working on that right now.
Well, that should be interesting. And I wish you the best with that, and might think about putting bridges in that to bridge together where you're
There are
from.
some cool bridges actually in North Wales. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Claire, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate the time that you took out to join us to speak to our students. And I'd like to thank you, our studio audience, for joining us today for this important and invigorating conversation. If you're interested in learning more about the upcoming 45th Cleveland International Film Festival, please visit clevelandfilm.org. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eric Siler.
Thank you so much.